Rain.
I didn't take it clear of the, you know, that's all that stuff. My eyes were so. Just turning off TV without things changing in our own. It doesn't matter, it's this tomorrow. It's not good enough, so just saying, no business. I have to, if possible, tomorrow. She gonna get you one, no, that's what. I just got something. She ordered one. What's that? That was set. Oh my goodness.
Show them the back of the ear.
Lord save me. Just we're all blending. Back row Baptist and not. We know your nomination.
Well, good evening, everyone. Thank you for being here. Appreciate your time and coming out on this evening. I'm just so grateful it's not raining because it seems like every time we have a meeting here, it's cold and rainy and this room gets colder. So I appreciate you coming out for this. My name is Mary Zirkle. I'm the Director of Planning and Community Development. I'm also the Economic Development Coordinator here for the town. I've been here since 2018 serving the town. I also serve as staff to our Planning Commission, Economic Development Authority, Housing Authority, and our Board of Zoning Appeals. And to let you know, mentioning our Planning Commission, that we do have commission members present this evening to hear any comments that you may have. They've been working very hard on this ordinance, and you'll hear more about that. So I want to thank you again for being here for proposed changes. Zoning is not a really amazing thing. It's one of those tools of planning, but it is not the end-all and be-all. It's just one way to get things done in the community to make sure things are equitable. And I understand there may have been a delay in mailing, so if some of you received letters last Friday, I understand that there was a lot of other mail that got ahead of ours, so I apologize if your email or your mail came in late. The big thing of those letters was just to let you know the process and where we are in it, and also help you find the information you need on the Town of Bedford zoning information page that we have available for you to actually look at your property in real time on an interactive map. The maps you'll see on there are really hard to read, and I apologize, but the better the map got, the bigger the file got, which means you're not going to be able to download it. So please, I recommend you use the interactive zoning map. And if you need any help with that, just drop by our office. We're open from 8:30 to 5, Monday through Friday. I have staff, Kathy Johnson, can help you as well. So either one of us can walk you through that. And one of the things I do want to mention too is that we are working to be more open to self-access by our residents so that you can find the information you need without having to come to staff. And that's one of the shortcomings we found with our current zoning ordinance, is that it shouldn't require someone translating just text so that you know what you can do with your property. So that was one of the reasons we embarked on this change a few years ago. So just to give you some context, zoning and subdivision ordinances are a part of the whole town code, just like the noise ordinance, just like the parking code, just like the tax code. Zoning is a part of town law. So ours, unfortunately, is a 1980s vintage model. And you can tell a lot of things need to be updated in this. And so that's the other reason we've been working on this. So it's been in need of updating to make it easier to use, clarify, take out some old stuff to where it's just easier for the public to use it. The Planning Commission has been working on this since March of 2022, and their work is now complete. The town attorney has provided his review and input as well. And to give you a little background, we also had an audit done in 2020. We gave a consultant 90 days to let us know what needed to change in the current ordinance. Good, bad, indifferent. What would be needed to make a change before we embarked on what became a full, I wouldn't call it a real full rewrite of the ordinance, but it was definitely an overhaul that was well needed. So tonight's meeting is going to be a little unconventional from a presenter's perspective. Our consultant had a conflict, so I asked him just to package his presentation, give it to us, give us all the background that we needed, so that it would also be available afterwards, so anyone can watch this on their own time. And just so you know, this is also being streamed live to our town YouTube page, and will be available for viewing after that. And I'll be able to answer questions after we hear from Todd Gordon of EPRPC. I may not be able to address individual questions tonight. We'll try and keep it general. I'm here, as I said, 8:30 to 5, Monday through Friday, to get specific about what may or may not be changing on property that you may own. So we did send a letter to every property owner in the town. That was almost 4,000 letters to be sure everyone had the same information going forward. So the main thing, and this is on public review, it's also on the website that I mentioned, is the text. This is the guts of the town law for zoning. I'm sorry, it just is what it is. So we try to make it easy for people to read. What's black is not changing. What's red is new. What's blue is moved. As we try to consolidate things through this ordinance, you can see what left and what just got put into another place for the zoning district at hand. Not every district was affected, but we just needed everyone to know there is some change. Whether it may affect you or not, you needed to know this. So the document is the main thing. There are 2 supplemental pieces that are not going to be in code. This is just our cheat sheets for all the uses and all the districts. This is for us to go, okay, I have an R1 zone, what can I do in it? Or then if you wanted to know specific use, is this use allowed in that district? Just snapshot. Nothing in code, because this can change, and it's, again, just a little help for staff and the public. The other document that you'll see in there is just a summary of the standards of each of the zoning districts. So, again, if you want to know what you could do in R1, here you go. It's all here, and you can see what's coming out, what's coming in, and we've actually had a reduction proposed in the lot sizes of some of the districts. So, again, that would affect some properties, but not all. So that's what you'll see in the document, in addition to a proposed map. This is not done. This is done. This is your current zone, right here. For the most part, nothing is changing. They look radically different for 2 reasons. This color is a standard, generally an industry standard for planning. So I could go from one locality to another across the state and realize that yellow is generally residential. Red is generally business. A darker color, brown or purple, is generally manufacturing. So this is radically different. The other thing it does is it takes in the land that came into the town July 1, and so you'll see those on the edges there. And I can speak more to that, and actually Todd will in his presentation. So I don't want to take up any more of that time because I do want to have time for your questions afterwards, but if you'll indulge me, I'm going to let someone else speak because he really put a lot of work into this with our planning commission. So, one moment.
Hello, my name is Todd Gordon. I'm senior planner at EPR, a planning and engineering firm in Charlottesville, Virginia. I'm sorry I can't be in Bedford this evening, but I'm making this recording to present some information about work that our firm has been doing with town staff and the town's planning commission on Bedford's zoning ordinance. This presentation covers some recommended zoning revisions that we think can help fix common issues, make zoning easier for property owners, town staff, and officials, and generally bring Bedford standards up to date. Tonight is an informal presentation for residents before the Planning Commission and Town Council officially take up the recommendations and adoption of any changes. The process of updating the zoning ordinance began in 2020 when our firm completed a separate zoning ordinance review process and report. That report identified issues and made recommendations. Phase 2 of this work over the past 18 months has been to draft specific text and map revisions that implement the strategies found in the review document, bring the code into line with changes in state law, match the vision of Bedford's comprehensive plan, and incorporate specific input from town staff and from the Planning Commission. Throughout this process, we've worked very closely with staff and the Planning Commission on individual recommendations. Bedford's a great town, and at no point in this process was the idea to reinvent the town, but to make small changes that would help it function better from a zoning perspective. If you review that Phase 1 document from 2020, you'll see that it's organized around 6 big themes or goals for the future. First, streamline the zoning ordinance document for clarity and usability. 2, protect existing single-family neighborhoods. 3, activate the Centertown neighborhood. 4, stimulate residential and employment growth. 5, increase development flexibility. And 6, put less focus on individual uses and more focus on scale and character. This presentation is organized around those same 6 themes. I'll talk about the individual revisions that can be made to accomplish these 6 goals. But before we get into specifics, I realize some people know a lot about how zoning works and others may not be as familiar. So I wanted to briefly go over some background information and terms. First of all, what is zoning? Zoning is a set of regulations governing how land can and can't be used. The zoning ordinance divides the town's land into geographic areas with different rules, what uses are allowed, how tall buildings can be, and so on. Zoning is allowed under law as a way to promote the health, safety, and general welfare of the community. Ultimately, zoning's job is to help minimize conflicts between uses, like light, noise, traffic, and more. Some important terms or concepts that will come up during this presentation. First of all, each zoning district includes a list of permitted uses and a list of conditional uses for that zone. Permitted uses, which are also sometimes called by right uses, are uses that are always allowed. You may still need to apply for a building permit and things like that, but the use is always allowed. Conditional uses, on the other hand, can be allowed, but they get additional review from the town. They may be allowed under certain conditions, like having 2 entrances or something like that. If a building or a use existed before the zoning ordinance existed, or before the rules were updated, then that use is called an existing non-conforming use. And as long as it remains actively used, it can go on, even though it may not meet current rules. Sometimes people use the term grandfathered for this sort of use. It doesn't have to be changed just because the rules have changed. Because of this, any change in the zoning regulations mainly only affects new buildings or changes in use. Another term is rezoning. You can always apply to rezone a property, that is to change it from one zone to another. There's an application process, there's a review by the Planning Commission, and a vote by the Town Council. Finally, the ordinance refers to the Planning Commission and the Town Council a lot. The Town Council is the elected group that ultimately approves or denies any change to zoning or any rezoning. The Planning Commission is appointed by the Town Council and hears any number of zoning issues. The Planning Commission makes a recommendation to the Town Council, who makes the final decision. As it stands, before any of these recommended changes, Bedford is divided into 18 zoning districts. The single-family residential district, R1A and R1E low-density residential districts, R2 medium-density, R3 high-density residential. There's the planned residential development district. There is a limited professional district, a B1 limited business district, that's the Centertown area, the B2 general business district, which is other areas including more highway commercial type use, commercial light industrial, the manufacturing district, the workplace campus district, which applies to the town's industrial park, the central neighborhood workplace district, which applies to a set of historic factory buildings, including Beale's Brewery and that area. The healthcare establishment district is a specific district that applies only to the hospital. The planned Memorial Park district, which applies only to the D-Day Memorial. There's a flood hazard district that applies to floodplains. And then there are two overlay districts. One, the traditional neighborhood overlay, which covers parts of 122 between the D-Day Memorial and Main Street, and the special corridor overlay district, which is specific to Independence Boulevard. So with that background, let's talk about potential revisions to the town's zoning ordinance. Our first goal was to streamline the zoning ordinance document for clarity and usability. So some proposed revisions. The first thing we can do is list all district information in a single place. In the current ordinance, information about individual zoning districts is found in various places. The statement of intent, what uses are permitted, building heights, and so on. Meaning that you have to flip around to different pages to find the information you need. With everything in one place, we feel it'll be easier to find the important information. Similarly, we can list all of the permitted and conditional uses within each district. The existing code has a kind of a nesting feature where, for example, in the R2 district, you may be allowed A, B, and C, but also anything in the R1 district, which means you have to, again, flip back and forth to different pages to get the full picture. So we'd like everything listed in one place. Another way we can streamline the code is to create a master table of permitted and conditional uses. Listing all the uses in a chart goes a long way to helping the ordinance be easier to use, both for property owners and for town staff. The last two changes to help with clarity and usability have to do with definitions. First, we can move all the definitions in the entire ordinance into a single definition section. As it is now, some definitions are found in other districts, in the flood hazard district. So again, relocating things all to one place where people are likely to find them. Secondly, we'd like to see the ordinance provide more definitions, including defining all land uses. The existing ordinance has a definition section, but it could cover more ground just to provide more information to people who may be using the code. Our second goal was to protect existing single-family neighborhoods. A couple of proposed changes here. First of all, the first thing we notice is that there are three different R1 zones. There's the R1, R1A, R1E, and that can be a little confusing. The only actual difference between these zones is a very small difference in the size of setbacks, or how close buildings can be to the lot line. We can simplify the ordinance by combining all of those R1 districts into a single R1 district with reasonable and flexible setbacks. Keep in mind that the setbacks only apply to new construction, not any existing home. Another issue that we went over with the Planning Commission was the popularity of rooftop solar panels. These panels are more affordable now and can help homeowners with their utility bills, but under existing zoning, solar is a conditional use, meaning you have to apply to the town for permission to install them. We're recommending that rooftop solar panels that primarily serve the house that they're attached to be a by right use. Any larger installation that's ground mounted or serves more than just the building that it's attached to would still be a conditional use and require an application. Our third goal was to help activate the Centertown neighborhood and make it a vibrant place for residents, visitors, and businesses. One proposed change here is to allow multifamily residential by right in the B1 zone. Multifamily includes apartments and condominiums. Right now, that sort of use is allowed conditionally. So allowing that by right may help bring more people to live downtown and in turn support businesses. Our fourth goal was to stimulate quality residential and employment growth. First, zoning needs to be up to date. Today, there are modern business types that the existing zoning ordinance just didn't consider. Modern land uses can help remove barriers to people who want to come and invest in Bedford and open new businesses. Some proposed new land uses include breweries, wineries, custom manufacturing, and hydroponic agriculture. The second recommendation here has to do with the planned residential development zone. The PRD zone is meant to allow creative master plan development proposals that don't quite fit in other zoning districts. A property owner could propose a development and work with town staff and leaders to approve the plan. Developments like Governor's Hill and Oakwood Villas are two examples of PRD projects. However, there are a lot of parcels that are zoned PRD that have no specific development plans in place. So the proposal is to remove this zone entirely and return those parcels to the R1 district. At the same time, create a new planned development district that property owners can use in the future. So on one hand, we want to add modern uses. On the other hand, we propose to remove some outdated ones. The existing ordinance includes uses like tea rooms and boarding houses that are just not commonly used terms. Again, we want the zoning ordinance to communicate clearly. Next, several residential zones give different minimum lot sizes based on whether or not the proposed house uses public water and sewer or uses individual well and septic. We would propose to remove that provision. In some cases, septic systems might still be used in the town, but in those cases, the lot size should be determined by the health department and qualified engineers rather than by the zoning ordinance to establish how much room that system needs in order to function. Goal 5 is to increase development flexibility. So make it easier for property owners to make use of their properties. To do that, we recommend adding certain light manufacturing and data center uses as conditional uses in the B2 zone. Again, that's the general business or highway commercial type zone. Second, we recommend the elimination of the traditional neighborhood overlay district. That district was originally meant as an optional alternative to underlying zoning for master plan developments. Unfortunately, it's not calibrated well to the land it actually applies to. The T&O, the traditional neighborhood overlay, only applies to projects that are 40 acres or larger, but the zone is actually applied to several much smaller parcels along 122 between the D-Day Memorial and Main Street. So a developer would have to buy multiple parcels and then assemble those parcels in order to make use of this zoning district. So as a result, this zone has never been used as it was intended. So while we've recommended rolling back the PRD and T&O zones, we certainly still support master plan development as an alternative path to the traditional zoning. So a new planned mixed development district can be a flexible alternative for property owners who want to propose creative projects that don't fit under traditional zones. Developers can request rezoning to planned mixed development, submit a master plan for potential approval. The PMD zone also includes guidance on what kinds of projects the town is looking for, including density, requirements for open space, mix of uses, and so on. Another modern use that the Planning Commission considered in this process is short-term residential rentals. That is, things like Airbnb and similar websites or apps. In this case, we're using the umbrella term homestays to cover those uses. We are recommending that homestays be allowed by right in commercial zones and only allowed with a conditional use permit in residential zones. That is, in the residential zone, you would have to apply and be approved by the town. We've also drafted special provisions for homestays that include requirements that owners register with the town, pay occupancy taxes the same way a hotel would, provide parking, limit the number of guests, and so on. There's also a process included there for the revoking of homestay registration if violations of the rules occur. Next, we have some recommended changes to the limited professional district, that is the LP. As it is, this zone is meant to provide a transition between residential and the B1 zone in the center town by allowing residential but also some certain office uses. Right now, the LP zone only exists on paper. There are no parcels that are actually zoned LP. Also, as it applies now, it only includes existing buildings, so no new buildings are allowed for commercial use in the LP. So we would like to propose to change that and allow new buildings. The change would allow new construction for certain commercial uses and kind of fill out that LP zone. Finally, goal number 6 was to put less focus on individual uses and more focus on scale and character. We can do that in several ways, one of which is to group retail and service uses into broad commercial retail and commercial service categories. The existing code includes longer lists of individual retail uses like bookstores, jewelry stores, clothing stores, and so on. That isn't really necessary, and no matter how long the list, you'll still miss certain business types. We've also proposed some revisions to the sign regulations. First, to provide a total budget of sign area based on the zoning district and the building frontage that we think is easier to understand overall. Second, to remove content-based sign regulations. For example, allowing gas station signs to be one size and real estate signs to be another size. Recent Supreme Court decisions have made content-based sign regulations illegal as a violation of the First Amendment. So we certainly need Bedford to be in coordination with overall law. The zoning code also contains some special provisions, that is additional requirements and guidance for certain uses. For example, rules for keeping chickens, rules for mobile home parks are all included in special provisions. As of now, some special provisions are kind of scattered throughout the document. The recommendation is to consolidate all of those into a single article. That's Article 8. We've also recommended some new special provisions with information on accessory dwelling units, drive-throughs, homestays, and the outdoor display of retail products. Finally, under the existing code, some districts don't have any requirements for lot size, lot coverage, or setbacks. Those include the LP, B1, B2, CLI, M1, and Central Neighborhood Workplace. There are just no requirements that are ever listed. We recommend some reasonable regulations to include in those zones to give direction to potential investors, property owners, where no dimensions were previously given. And as with the permitted and conditional uses, we've created a chart to display dimensional requirements in a simplified form that we think helps the ordinance to be a little better understood. To go along with the zoning text recommendations we've just discussed, there were also some changes proposed to the zoning map, that is, in which zoning district individual parcels are placed. We've used this process in some cases to suggest other map changes. You should have printed versions of the zoning map in the room with you for you to inspect, and that'll be probably the best way for you to see that. But I'll cover some of the highlights of the map revisions here. First, we talked about the elimination of the PRD district and changing parcels, zone PRD back to R1. The PRD would still be maintained on certain parcels that have active PRD development plans like Governor's Hill and Oakwood Villas, but the map is revised to show R1 zoning on those parcels. Secondly, we talked about removing the T&O designation. And so we show a map revision, removing the overlay and leaving those properties just as the underlying zoning shows. T&O would be maintained on a few parcels that have approved T&O uses now. Next, we proposed to map certain select parcels into the LP district. Again, that's the district that exists and is meant to be a transition into the B1 Centertown zone, but no properties are currently mapped LP. So we have some parcels that we'd like to suggest be mapped to LP to form that transition between zones. We proposed to revise parcels in the area of Maxwell Circle from the current M1 designation to CLI. That's the light industrial. That would better accommodate nearby residential uses. So that works with uses that are on the property now, but eliminates the potential for serious industry and manufacturing in an area where there are homes very nearby. We also show a revision to parcels in the area of Rough Drive and Earnhardt Drive, as well as Macon Street, from M1 or B2 to residential. That's R1 residential, because that's the use that's there now. So we want the map to reflect existing use of those parcels. Finally, the town code requires that newly incorporated parcels all be zoned R1. So for the July 2023 reversion, where the town incorporated new parcels, the draft map shows the required R1 zoning district now, as opposed to the county zoning that was previously on those parcels. But we also show some select changes to accommodate existing uses. So that includes areas along 221 and Forest Road that are shown as low intensity non-residential districts, CLI and LP, to allow residential and commercial uses that minimize non-conformity of uses. So we want to allow businesses that are going on in those areas to have zoning that fits the character of their business so they can continue. Other areas of that where reversion parcels are shown with new zoning. So for the Harmony development, showing an applied PMD to incorporate the development plans that apply on that parcel as well. So again, these maps should be in the room with you, and you can have a closer look at those. With all of that, I want to thank you for listening to this presentation. I realize this is a lot of information and that zoning can be a bit technical, but it's an important way to plan for the health, safety, and generally prosperous future of Bedford. So I thank you very much for listening, and I believe staff should be in the room for additional questions and discussion. Thank you all very much again.
Thank you for allowing us to be flexible with our presentation material this evening. The time is 7:33, and I am open for questions that you may have. If there's anything that I can answer for you, we'll try and do this in an orderly fashion, because I know everybody really wants to know how the zoning is going to affect them or not. So, are there any questions that I also just want to recognize that there are members of town council in the room this evening. We thank you for being here in person so that you can be aware of what you might hear from the residents and property owners. So, what may I answer?
Well, I'm not sure if it's a zoning question or not, but my property went from agricultural to R1, and I'm just wondering if there are any tax implications being R1 or R2, R3, or does that make a difference, or is that just an appraisal?
Yeah, so the question's related to land use and taxation. You have an ag use and now zoned residential. So taxation is one thing, land use is another. You are taxed based on your use of your property. So that'll bring in something land use. If you're in a land use program, that's one thing. So it's a little strange for us, as a lot of the land that came in July 1 was zoned agricultural residential in the county, which allows agriculture and residential. The town does not have an agricultural district. However, it does have a residential 1 district, which allows agriculture. So the ordinance has added a definition for agriculture to put that in a proper context of what agriculture is in the town. So agriculture is allowed in R1, just as it would have been in your county zoning district. But we do regulate chickens. I just want to add this one little odd thing, because if you imagine chickens on lot sizes like this are not like chickens on lot sizes like this. So we do require a chicken permit for chickens. Yes, ma'am.
I have a question about where is all this coming with residential growth? I was under the impression that we are a small town, and the way that people that I've encountered in the last 3 years that I lived here, like when I was in church one time and introduced myself to someone, they said, "Where do you live?" And I said, "Governor's Hill." The lady turned her nose up and she said, "Well, we like a lot of land. You know, we don't like where you live." And then it just seems that, you know, now you're doing, what would I call it?
A new focus or a new priority.
Yeah, and you're having like more high density homes, and you're like for R1 making the lots smaller. But you know, did you ever send a survey out to people? Are you doing what people want, or because it doesn't seem to what people that I have talked to, it just seems like a contradictory to the small town or the little town. A small town is 5,000 people or less, and you're trying to grow this and put in maybe put big box stores in some time. And from what I understand, people don't like that here, at least the ones that I have, talked to.
So the question is about density and growth in the town and how this is being accommodated with an ordinance change. The lots are what they are. R1 zoning lot size is not getting any smaller. As Todd mentioned, it's 10,000 square feet. It doesn't go below that. And you'll notice how much R1 we have in the area, and very little high density R2 and R3.
But then the backyards, she said for R1, I mean, they were 50 feet. Of course, mine's only 10. But they have, it's changing to 25.
The minimum setback in the R1 district, the question was about setbacks. It's proposed to go from 50 feet from the back of the house to the back of the property line. So if it goes from 50 feet to 25 feet, that doesn't get many more houses replaced on that. That means someone can get a bigger house.
But how is this, like with the comprehensive plan and possibly the will of the taxpayers, residents, to have a small town? And
So
this just seems to be all.
again, there's no more land being changed to density, to a higher density district. That's not happening. These lots are what they are, but someone could come in and rezone any parcel in the town to a different district and ask for whatever density they want. So that is different. So taxation is separate, so there's no new business districts being planned. It's just zoning it for what it is. So what we're changing is not the R1 map, but the standards within it. Yes, sir.
And I think the question she's trying to get to is it really the town's vision to cut the backyard setbacks of R1s from 50 to 25, not understanding that by doing that, it makes the people behind those homes feel more crowded and much more urban and much less rural? Is that the vision of the town?
So the question has to do with the reduction in setbacks that are proposed from 50 feet to 25 feet. People can do 50, people can do 35, people can do 25, but they can't go less than 25. So it's just preference. So this also would give people more room, I guess, for accessory dwellings in the backyard. So people can choose to be there, but it cannot be any more than less than 25.
But you're saying the town has no preference, that people have nice backyards abutting their,
Well, thank you for the question. So it's asking about what people are doing with their backyards. People can have nice backyards, they can have bad backyards, but we're telling them they don't have to be 50 feet off of the property line to give them choice. Right now, we're finding that the lots that exist may not have 50 feet. I mean, they may not be 100 feet deep, which means they're confined to a very small home, and that's not what everyone wants. So it's just giving people more flexibility to develop the property that they have. May I answer another question? Yes, sir.
In the PRD section, I mean, you eliminated it, which is good in my neighborhood, but if there was a license or application for something preceding this, but there's nothing has happened yet, does that go through or is it getting negated?
The question is about planned residential districts, and if we have a plan in hand with them that's actually in an application stage. Is that your question?
Yeah, nothing's, no
Yeah.
ground's been broken.
No ground's broken, nothing approved. So if someone were to present us with a planned residential district plan, that would actually, they would have to say what they're going to do with the property. In a planned residential district, most people would be looking for a higher density of use. It's not going to change the residential use mix. They can just get more of that residential use. So I don't know of any coming in, but if someone had something in there, it would go through the process as a planned residential district at this time, because the ordinance has not changed. And just for clarification, as it's written now, the recommendation is it would become effective January 1. So anything in the process is in the process.
Even though it's only on paper.
Even if it's gone through a process to the Planning Commission for public hearing.
We had a situation where I think it was tabled, I don't know if it was eliminated, but.
I do not have an active application
Okay.
for planned residential districts. Nothing is officially in hand and scheduled for public hearing. Yes, sir. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
You said that the town doesn't have agricultural zoning,
Correct.
so basically the agricultural areas are now residential,
Yes.
and they can be developed as residential.
Yes. So the question had to do with the town does not have an agricultural district, and would those lands, as proposed to be R1, would they be developed as residential? They would. The lot sizes would apply to those, but it would still have agricultural uses. Yes, ma'am.
What's going to happen at the planning meeting?
At the planning meeting on November 2nd, 5:30 p.m. in this room, the Planning Commission will be here to take public comment officially on the record. So tonight, I'm not recording anything, so if you send anything in between now and then, I would put it in their record and they would see it that night. And they would basically take your comments under advisement, see what they maybe need to change, tweak, fix, before they would make a formal recommendation of full text that would go to Town Council as proposed on December 12th at 7 p.m. in this room. Do we have anyone else who needs to ask a question before we go back to others who have asked? Yes.
I just wanted to understand your answer. So the planning commission meeting is November 2nd. If there aren't sufficient negative comments or concerns from citizens, isn't it possible that the planning commission would approve everything that you talked about tonight?
They could not approve. The question was, what would Planning Commission do with recommendations they get from the public? Planning Commission is a recommending body, so they will make a recommendation of the work that they have put together over the past 18 months that would go forward. Again, council is the final answer for this, but even then, zoning ordinances can change. We've seen this happen over time, but those recommendations would go forward just as that. Council could do what they want with that recommendation, make any changes up to that point. So between November 2nd and December 12th, there's a second opportunity for a second public hearing for you to speak again. So then council would actually take action or not. It's up to them. Is there anyone? Yes, sir.
Is this presentation, does it body the recommendation you're making to the council?
So the text that is, the question was about, is this a recommended text from Planning Commission? So this is the work as it has been drafted. So this is not a formal recommendation from Planning Commission. At their meeting in October, since their work was done, They initiated an ordinance change, which is just the formal process of moving it forward for public comment. That's where we are tonight, starting our public comment process for this. So, yes, sir.
So my property was R1 and it's been changed to PRD. Why was it changed?
The question has to do with changing between R1 and PRD, Planned Residential Development, and it actually has not changed. The recommendation is that, it's actually, I think you have it in reverse. The property you're speaking of is zoned Planned Residential District now, and the recommendation is that it be R1. Again, PRD equals R1. These are the same uses allowed in both districts. PR, the planned part of that, allows people to request greater density of a residential type. It's still residential.
Okay, so the change, when I bought the property, only one house would be put on the property. Now, because this is the newer one, now because that's the newer
Yes.
one, R1. Okay, now because it's R1, more homes can be put on
Yes.
that property.
No, so the question is the density allowed in R1. R1, the lot sizes are still the same. You have one parcel, you get one home. That's across the board in any residential district that's zoned R1, R1A, R1E. Same thing for planned residential district. If you came in now and applied for a residential zoning permit for your house, as you did, you got one house.
Correct.
You're in PRD. Be the same thing if you came in at R1. They're equal. That's why planned residential development didn't get us anything without someone asking for it. So there's no loss, we think, to a planned district becoming just residential.
But I could apply to have more homes put on my property now.
As in a planned residential district, an owner could apply to get a higher density.
Okay.
And by doing that, it would be more of a duplexes, multifamily, townhouses, or apartments. Someone could apply for that with a conditional use permit currently.
And how would I know that somebody would be applying for that with the property around my property?
So the question has to do with how would someone know that something is being requested for development or development change. An application comes into the town office, we schedule it for public hearing, and that's when it becomes public. We send out letters to the adjoining owners,
Okay.
there's a sign in the yard, and there's also legal ads posted 2 weeks prior to both the planning commission and council. So we do the best we can to get the word out, and word of mouth does wonders. May I answer any other questions related to general zoning changes? Yes, ma'am.
The land that the county owns in the town, is that zoned?
The land that the county owns in the town is zoned. All land in the town is zoned, even that owned by the United States of America. Now, do we have any jurisdiction there? No.
So it's got I'm assuming it will be zoned. What is it zoned over where the rec department is and the school is?
Are you on Mountain? You on Mountain Avenue?
I'm on College Street,
College
on
Ave.
Mountain Avenue.
Yes, so that zoning is not proposed to change.
What is it zoned at?
I'm not sure, it might be R1A, I'd have to get there and look, it's a little, it isn't changing, still. So the ownership doesn't affect the zoning.
The schools are allowed to own one school.
Yes, yeah,
I
yes.
understand that, Tim, but I didn't know whether the next field down, well, we call it three fields, but, you know, you got the top where the primary school is, and then you've got the part down that nobody ever bothers to do anything with,
Right.
and then you got the bottom part where
I would think that'd be
the other
all.
It's
part.
still R1, it's all
Yeah,
over.
I think that's still all.
Yes. Is there anything else? Again, my office is open 8:30 to 5, Monday through Friday, and the information is available. Go back to this website here. Town of Bedford zoning.info. If you got your letter, it's mentioned there. It's also in the footer of your letter if you need additional information. It's a little hard, I must say, to use the interactive map, but this is where I was telling you you can find information for your parcel. interactive zoning map here. And nice notice. And then you just type in either your address or your RPC number, and it will take you to that. It doesn't actually highlight your parcel, and I'm not sure why. We tried to work this out with GIS, and it just was not showing it in that color, but it'll take you straight to it. And you can toggle between proposed and current zoning. So you can see, just look for the letters, because again, this is going to be very confusing, but if you just look for the letters to see if those remain the same. But then again, keep in mind the map is one thing, you have to be mindful of what the text might be doing underneath that zoning map. So November 2nd is the Planning Commission public hearing in this room. You're all welcome to attend, provide your comments, email me, and I'll provide those to the Planning Commission or Council at that time. If you have any concerns, I think it would help the Planning Commission in making a decision of what does move forward in a recommendation. Again, this is not final. Even when it does become final and goes into effect at whatever point in time, zoning ordinances can be changed for public benefit. Yes, sir.
Yes, I have a question coming to the process and the time. Does the town realize that citizens only have about 14 days from the time we got the notice to review whatever would affect you on a 190-page document and be planning that in order to get in your concerns or whatever your questions and issues to the planning commission? Do you realize we only have 14
So the question was the timing of the notice of the letters for the public hearing. It meets state code for that. I'm not saying we're not doing the minimum. We are doing what we need to for that. It's also in the newspaper. And so you'll have that first, again, public hearing number 1, Planning Commission. Public hearing number 2 for Town Council. My count between those 2 meetings is 40 days. So if you don't get your information in for the first one, you will have a second chance. And again, lots of information. The Planning Commission is just the recommending body, at which time they're going to be making changes that they heard from the public, if that is what they get from the
I
public.
didn't phrase my question very clearly. What I'm asking is, you understand the impact it is on citizens to have 14 days for their first chance to give input on something that the town's been working on since 2020 and working apparently very vigorously for 18 months. I only got a chance to look at some of the things today, and there's a lot of changes that I'm not going to make comments on.
Sure.
And I'm going to have less than 14 days.
So the question comes in to, again, the timing between when the notice was given versus a 190-page document. I'm going to say about a third of which has just been stricken or moved. So if I can help you find what you need specifically in that document, again, just let me know. If there is something that affects your Governor's Hill development, it doesn't, because planned residential, Governor's Hill has a development plan. That's not going to be affected. So if I can help you with any questions beyond that, I would be happy to. Yes, ma'am.
So what is the vision of the town?
The comprehensive plan from 2017 guides that vision, and we can make that available. It's actually online. So controlled, appropriate growth that sustains the citizens, businesses that work well with the town, provide adequate employment for that. But I'm glad you brought that up, because the next thing we are working on after the zoning ordinance is now that we have additional land and people that we need to talk to about what is the revised vision of this. That's the next thing we are going to be working on, is our comprehensive plan. So stay tuned, 2024, that is our next big project. So we look forward to that. Stay tuned for the public meetings.
I'm sorry.
Yes, sir.
One last question about the comprehensive plan. Perhaps I'm just uneducated about what the Code of Virginia means when it talks about towns and counties having to do a comprehensive plan. But from reading the things that the Code of Virginia says you have to have in your plan, it seems as though you need to do your visioning before you modify your zoning. You need to decide what are the issues with the current town, the way things are. You have to vision things you want to change. And it seems to me that changing the zoning should really have been the last step. So I'm trying to understand the idea behind doing it in the reverse.
Sure. So the question has to do with the timing of the comprehensive plan with the zoning ordinance changes and how zoning is coming before comprehensive planning. Yes, in an ideal world, we would start a comprehensive plan. So we reviewed it in 2022, said we weren't going to make any changes at that time because we knew we had new residents coming in that we needed to hear from. There was not in our best interest to go down the road of planning with people that were not in the town at that time. So the decision's been made that we will proceed with making changes that we believe are going to improve this document to make it easier to use. And then we're going to go back to the community and say, what has this vision changed? It's all on the table. What do we want to see in Bedford? But again, we have residential districts. There's not much else they could be for people with houses. The time is now 7:53. If there are no other questions, I'll let you have your evening back and appreciate you coming and calling, sending me emails, anything we can do to, help you with this. And again, November 2nd and December 12th. Thank you for your time.